All right. Let's see if I can kind of get my comments here. Come on, where are my comments? Good morning, everybody. And in case we haven't met, that echo, by the way, I'm doing something a little bit different. First of all, in case we haven't met, my name is Doug, and welcome to Doppler'S Gear Garage. I can, in a moment, see the comments and reaction. Jimmy Arsenault. Good morning, my dear friend. Thank you so much. Forever grateful and indebted to you. Zach, what's going on? You know, I've never actually said this, I don't believe, but my guess is you will remember. Hang on, you know what? Let me turn off that delay. I'm doing something a little different here today, but I can. There we go. There was a guy who used to roller skate around Venice with that old Charvel with the kind of the red bullet, or I should say, the bullseye on there. Do you remember that guy? There you go. All right, San Jose all day. Come on, Griffin, what's happening, my dear friend? Oh, right, friend. All right, hello. Do you always put the time-related effects and the effects loop, or do I put them in front? That's a great question. Give me a minute to just say hello to everybody. Sonny, good morning. The headphones, are we going to get top tone? You know, I'm in process, and I will explain that in a moment. Albert, hello, my dear friend. You are always the best. Jerry, good morning. Okay. I remember that cat kind of became a legend, right? I'd love to know what happened. It was an old vintage Charvel, groovy. All right, Griffin, let's talk about this. So first of all, let me be clear, just in case you're on a mobile device and that font down below is about that big. Time-based effects, generally you either want to place them in the effects loop or you want to place them in post after your microphone input. And generally speaking, where all this stuff kind of got its start was a lot of old style rigs didn't have time-based effects back in the day. You just kind of had your amp. Let's say it was a Gibson Les Paul and a Marshall, and you walked into the studio, and then you got all these beautiful old sounding, for example, reverbs. Give you a little bit more of that. And that's not to say that the old school Fender amps didn't have reverb, but for a lot of us who would kind of think of the high gain thing, we didn't have reverb in amps for a long time, and we didn't have effects loops for a long time. So it would get added in post. So the idea was, how do you get the sound of the amplifier into your time-based effects? So generally, effects loop is where you want to place them, or after your amp in your DAW. Another nuance to that, oh, that reverb's gonna drive me batty, is with something like Cab Clone IR on the back of your new Badlander, you can come out of that into your stereo effect, like a VP4, split that signal into a power amp, mix the dry signal across the left and the right, but generally have stereo delay and reverb on the left and the right, and run that into a pair of cabinets like that or on the back. I've got a gig next Saturday night at a little place called Antlers, and I'm kind of in the process of figuring out exactly which rig that I'm going to bring, but generally speaking, what I do is I kind of run a very light stereo rig. That is to say, I'll usually use 2 different delays, left and right, and I'll bring them, instead of being hard pan, hard left, hard right, I'll bring them in a little bit close to the center, such that if it's actually brought through the PA and somebody's on the far left of the room, somebody's on the far right of the room, they're not just hearing one delay, they're not just hearing the other, they're going to hear a blend of the two. You also got to watch out for stereo chorus. But that's one of the other things you can do with an amp like yours or an amp like these guys that I'm playing through. As far as kind of what I'm doing this morning, and unfortunately this mic right here kind of spoils a little bit of the fun, but that amp right back there, I am in the process of shooting a video on the Badlander series. And it's taken a little bit longer than I initially planned, but I'm kind of okay with that, especially for folks like you, Griffin, who are in love with these amps. Basically, there's a pair of Badlander 100s there. Let me mute that mic. The level's going to be a little bit. Let me add a little bit of the fun stuff in there, like the delay and the add the mic back in. The point being is that what I've got is a mic, a company called, gosh, if I can get my finger in the right place, there we go. That's a DPA mic, and it sounds really, really, really close to the actual sound of the cabinet the sound coming out of the cabinet, which is kind of a hat trick that's taken me a little bit of time to learn. It's going to be one of the things I'm going to be sharing in this Badlander video. All right, so all that to say, my big learning point of the week is, number one, for those of us, and do me a favor, let me know down in the chat here if any of you, Mark, good morning, Maestro, great to see you. There we go. His guitar is handmade from a famous builder in Venice back in the 80s. Can't recall his name. I thought it had the Charvel logo on it. We're talking about the guy that used to roller skate around Venice Beach playing said Charvel. Everybody needs another guitarist. Antlers, awesome. I look forward to seeing you, my dear friend. Absolutely more gear. Like what? Is your wife new to this? Come on. Eric, great to see you, my friend. I've missed you. Always a pleasure. That no mic tone. So the funny thing is, Steve Corral, what's going on? That was a Charvel. Hello, my man. Great to see you. So Steve, the interesting thing is Steve and I are boogie brothers. Not that he and I are the only boogie brothers in the house, but one of the things that's happened in my week. So I want to unpack what I learned this week, but I'm also going to try and stay on top of the chat. For those of us, I started to ask the question. I saw you again. Good morning, Song Moinster. Great to see you. Hello, hello. So, for those of us that use reactive load box, I want to know how many of you just go direct and don't have a cabinet running, because my big takeaway from the week is as follows, and I'm doing a bunch of testing and trying stuff out as I'm kind of doing this Badlanders video series, but there's a bunch of stuff that pertains to anything that you might be doing as it relates to, good morning, Mike Rand, recording where you're like, okay, you know what, I'm in a home environment. Tony, what's going on, my man? Great to see you. Where you're doing home recording, you're like, hey, volume is an issue. So what I discovered, and it's no surprise, is that when I'm using Cab Clone IR on the back of any of these, not this one doesn't have it, but on any of the Badlander amps, and I have a speaker connected to the amplifier, the amp is using the speaker, as its load. And then when you disconnect the speaker and it uses the internal reactive load, and I did it with a test in Pro Tools, and I could see and hear, no surprise, the difference. So the moral of the story is as follows. It's threefold. Number one is that if you're going to use some sort of reactive load, know that your amp is going to behave differently than if you had an actual speaker connected. That's a really important piece in all of this. I cannot stress how important that is. There is a box from Mojo Tone that I didn't get a chance to get hooked up for this particular live stream, but in the future, that box is going to become increasingly important for a number of reasons. In the Boogie Facebook group, somebody kind of gently, it's not even a heckling, it's kind of like, dude, what are you new? They were like, well, why don't you shoot your own IRs? And I was like, I don't know how. But I could take a YouTube tutorial and figure it out. Then what I would do is I would use a Vintage 30. Now, this is the other thing about all of this, is it is my belief, and I have not tested this, but I'm nearly positive, that if you use different speakers as the load, the amp's going to react differently. If you think about how the amp sounds through different speakers, it's because those speakers have a certain frequency curve. And so a different speaker, in my opinion, in reverse, because the speaker and the amp are talking to each other, is going to have a different, if you will, reflexive curve on the amplifier. So using whatever speaker you're using as your active load, I think you want to be conscious of the frequency response of that speaker and, of course, the impedance. So I'm going to be loading up that box from the good people over at Mojotone, and I'm going to be doing some important test work. And I see this thing's I'm getting some comments here. Good morning, Radar. Great to see you, my friend. I hope your Saturday morning group went great. So the point being is that in the process of all of this, I'm onion skinning a little bit, but bear with. I'd have to say, and this, I am biased, my favorite cabinets in the world are Boogie cabinets, especially with Boogie amps. There's just something rich and warm and huge and big about them that's unparalleled. They are very difficult to mic until you kind of find the right mic. I spent about 4 or 5 hours. Look at this chat blowing up. I can't wait to start reading. So let me just make sure I focus, Fox. And I started off with the 121 and the 57 because those are usually the tools to kind of catch the body with the 121 and the top end with the 57 and blend them. But I couldn't get the warmth of what was coming out of the amp. I'm going to mute my vocal mic here for a quick second. I know the level's not going to be quite right. It's one of the things I'm working on. And that sounds an awful light like what's happening in the room. So that DPA mic is a big deal of just fighting. First of all, for those of you who are not used to placing mics, there are two things. If this is the face of the cabinet, how close or how far away creates something, as you get closer, called proximity effect. The closer you are, you get this unnatural bass buildup. And the further you move away, the more you decrease the proximity effect. And then if this is the center of the dust cap, and I kind of get the microphone, generally the perfect spot to shoot for is the edge of said dust cap. And that's more or less where I start. And then I just generally move the mic back and forth a little bit until the location as it relates to the edge of the dust cap and the proximity sound and feel like the amplifier do. And it's usually a sweet spot. Once you kind of get there, you know it. So all that to say, I really, in the process of this, in preparing to do this Badlander video and really kind of taking my time to do the research such that it can serve people like Griffin and myself who are Badlander fanatics, but also for those of us like Steve who are Boogie cabinet fanatics. And one of the conversations I had when I was over at Steve's house was there was a particular vertical 212 horizontal 212 Boogie cabinet that some people love and other people don't love as much. And so the point being is each one of these cabinets has its own unique nuance. And so capturing that in the microphone and kind of going, here's the amp with this cabinet, that cabinet, is a reveal. And as this chat is blowing up. I love this. So the thing that I learned at Antlers, this bar and grill. Good morning, Kevin. Great to see you. Hello. And Braden, good morning to you. Come on, Stirs. Come on. Hello. Let me jump over there in just a minute. I see you. But the idea is that 2 times ago, I did a rehearsal with a band. So I'm going to play with tracks because that's what makes sense economically for this gig. Was in with the rhythm section rehearsal with 2 112 cabinets. Sounded amazing in this little rehearsal space. Got into the venue, which is long and relatively narrow, and my guitar, be it the live bass, live drums, and the venue, just disappeared. And I had a long conversation. He hates when I say this. My handler at Mesa Boogie, my artist relations dude. And I love this guy. His name's Trent. He's just the best. And so the thing is that we were talking about the nuance of the fact that you have a 60-watt speaker, and now you have 4 of them, and you have 4 times the mass. And if you're using 2 cabinets, then you have 8 times the mass of one 112, or 4 times the mass of 2 12s. And so you also have the headroom of the speaker, but you also, with a larger cabinet, get larger, more resonance. So if you have, for example, one of the mini rectifier cabinets, they are less deep than the traditional rectifier cabinets at the bottom, depending on whether you have a slant or a straight. But at the bottom, the 112 rectifier, the 212 horizontal, the 112 wide body rectifier, the rectifier traditional straight and slant, all at the bottom have the same depth. And because of that, they have this larger amount of body, which if you're playing something where you're detuned or something, really matters. It's going to be in this video. But the other part, if you're doing something that's kind of a little bit more stratty, like Mark Turvey, where you don't need that extra body, that what's actually neat is the more traditional depth. Actually, the bottom end doesn't always need to be there. And if you know, one of the mistakes guitar players make, and it's a dangerous one, is they start painting in the bass player's lane, and you get what's called masking, where the bass player just needs to live there. One of my dear friends, Brooks Lundy, from the San Francisco Bay Area, he has a band called Stung, and this guy can play Sting's bass lines, which are incredibly intricate, and sings Sting's vocal lines at the same time with a level of awesome that's really awesome. But for the gig that we were on together, I had a JP2C, and I had what I believe is the 80 hertz fader down, and he came over and looked at it, and he's like, I'm not sure why you're doing that, because traditionally that's one that's, you know, in the smiley face V, that one is elevated. I'm like, I want to be out of the way of the bass. And, you know, so for me, I'm always conscious of when I'm painting with my brush, I want to paint in my lane. All right, holy cow. Let me just kind of scroll back up here, because I'm sure I missed some really, really, really good stuff. All right. All right, when you use an OD up front, what is your preference? I use a Doom pedal with the gain all the way off, and it sounds magnificent. It's called a witch burner. So the funny thing is, I do not use a drive pedal in the front of my rectifier amplifiers, and this is something. Arguably, one of my lessons this week is what are the things that I'm not doing that I should be doing to at least understand this, right? So the traditional thing with these amplifiers is you're going to use a Maxon 808. Maxon, by the way, manufactured all these vintage pedals for Ibanez, so it's basically the same thing as a TS 808. You turn the gain down, you pummel the front end, it cuts the bass, it pumps up the mids, and it more or less takes, you know, if I could loosely say this, it kind of begins to do to a traditional rectifier, makes it a little bit into a Badlander. But you can also use it into a Badlander, and, you know, it can have this very interesting effect of tightening things up in very interesting ways. And it's something that I just need to explore. I need to understand better. So I am not the person to speak to about or on that topic yet. The other thing is that there has been, after about 10 requests, all right, what about the Mr. Scary mod? And finally I went like, okay. So I reached out to David Sazzato, so whatever his name is properly pronounced as David, my apologies. And he's actually going to send the Hot Mod 2 over and not the Mr. Scary. And he just said, you know, give that a whirl and see how you like it. That's not going to be in this Badlander video because there's a range of reasons. One, it could potentially void your warranty, which is bad. And two, that's not the scope of that particular video. But it's one of the things, eventually people kind of saying, well, why aren't you checking this out? Or why don't you know about this? And I was like, I don't know why, and I don't have a good reason, and I guess I need to. All right. Okay, so go direct, no cab because of the silent stage. So this is really one of the interesting things that I also have to explore, but not in this video, is exploring the different reactive loads that are out there. Because as Zach pointed out, it is really important. In many instances, you do not have the option of dragging along a speaker in a box. I may increasingly become a proponent of the Mojo Tone box that I've got is a 212 box. I may increasingly become a proponent of, if you are a tube amp fanatic and you're just using one amp, or using one amp and using some effects and slaving the one amp into the other, which is another way to kind of get one amp to be in two places at the same time, and you can take that load off of there. No, that's not going to work. Yes, it will. No, it won't. You need to have two. To be continued. Internal sorry. If you're going to put a load on the one amp, and but you need to have two amps that are sending signal to speakers, you need to have two reactive loads. Even if one preamp section's going. Sorry, that's me doing the math in my head. So the point being that if you're just using one head, having a cabinet that's there, if you only can run direct, which is increasingly the case, having some sort of little ISO box there so you can put the actual load of the actual speaker that you're putting on the amplifier there, and then running an IR. I'm going to do some further testing, but as my tests already kind of in the first stages, I'm like, this is a thing, it's an important thing, and it's a game changer. If you really want to capture the essence of your amp, and over the course of this week, I kind of reached out to my buddy Justin York. He sent some of his IRs over. I have all of the Petrucci IRs as well. So I'm going to be spending some time going back and forth between the stock Boogie ones and those, and kind of doing some experimentation. But as I started to allude to before, different reactive load boxes have different reactive loads. One of the great things about the Waza tube amp expander is that as you adjust the presence and the resonance, you can adjust the reactive load for a number of the most common amplifiers that are out there. That's super important in terms of the way the power amp thinks it's actually seeing a speaker. That is, say, if you're forced to not have any sort of speaker as your actual load with your reactive load, which reactive loads seem to perform most like the amplifier? Because I think the majority of the people would be like, sign me up for that if that's an option, and doing some tests and really, kind of seeing that. I don't think that's going to fit in this particular video, but I will allude to it. Again, for those of us that are at home trying to go, how do we make this giant fire-breathing thing work at a volume that my neighbors aren't going to kill me? I'm not going to get thrown out of my, apartment, etc. But I can also capture the vibe of what I'm looking, when I plug into my speaker cabinet, and I'm like, there's the magic. And that's really kind of what happened this past week, is the Cab Clone IR on the back of the Badlander sounds great. But when I started off with the 50-watt Badlander combos, all my work was done direct. I just kind of went direct, and that's how I got to know the amp. When I got the first 100 and the second 100, I just started plugging into the cabinet. I'm like, oh, I want to experience this in the room. I want to know what that's like. And as I went from the cabinet into Cab Clone IR, I went like, all right, there's a difference here, and that's a reasonable thing. Nobody said it's going to be identical, but I really realized how much I absolutely love the nuance of the sound of the cabinet mic'd up, and I'm like, okay, I need to figure out how I can recreate that in more or less any kind of an environment. That's a bit of a rabbit trail, but for those of you that are the serious diehards, like, hey, I spent all this money on my amplifier, I want to know how to make my computer sound like my amplifier when I'm done with my tracks. It sounds and feels like my amp. It's a big deal. All right. But Zach, your point is right on target. There are many situations that we've just got to be running direct. And by the way, I apologize for the stupid look of the headphones. I think headphones are like, well, actually, this is the thing. I'm going to have a little conversation about headphones. First of all, the Audio Technicas, these are the ATH. The heck are you? They're the ATH. I had to remember the model number, and it's not on here, which is really kind of stupid. Or I just can't see it. But these particular headphones, you walk into pretty much any studio, they're going to have them. So it's kind of like the backline Marshall 412 with the 75s, right? You want to know them. And so I'm forcing myself to do this because there's going to be probably mics up in the room, and I've just got to do it. And it's not something that I've necessarily been good at. I really love having my ears open in the room and hearing what the amp and the room and the guitar are saying to each other. but it's been a blind spot that I'm conscious of that I need to fix. So I want to encourage you, where you know you've got blind spots, run towards them and fix them. Like using an overdrive in the front of the amplifiers, know how to do that. If I skip the amp, it feels very different and kind of throws me off. So come on, Stirs. There we go. Duh, I'm a little slow. Love that. And this is one of the things that last week I went to do the Gibbs Sunday thing, and I kind of went, oh, right, the amp is reacting differently because the load it's seeing is not the cabinet. Duh. The load it's seeing is a reactive load, which does a lot of the same thing, but not the exact same thing. And the feel is going to be different. And you're right on target in that, you know what, all of a sudden it starts to feel different. So how do we go about keeping the sound and the feel, but somehow reducing the volume and finding a way to work around that? So that is to say, is it possible to use the load of the speaker on the amplifier, shoot an IR that sounds just like your amp, load that into whatever, and then have the speaker in the box, next to no volume in the room? You can, if you want, lose the headphones, and have your guitar, your amp, the speaker, and the IR behave, let's say 95 to 98% of the same way as if you had the cabinet mic'd up. I'd even settle for 90% and above, because then you just kind of adjust the controls. That's one of the things Justin York mentioned. It's like, hey, you just EQ things a little bit differently. However, I will say the sound of these cabinets, it's just magic. And for those of you that okay, it's just a thing. And I said it before, but good morning, Kevin. You and I are going to, at some point, talk about... So if you're Australian, I said we're going to talk about knobs. It's actually kind of nasty. But if we're American, we're going to talk about knobs. So in any case, I probably shouldn't have said that. All right, Steve. With the difference between speaker and reactive low tones, do you then have to mix those in a live situation? So this is a multifaceted conversation, right? Because the implications are anywhere and everywhere you make sound. So in a perfect world, I believe, my hypothesis, unproven, is that having a reactive speaker, I'm going to call it a reactive speaker box, because it's going to keep an actual load on the amplifier. And then in turn being able to use an IR. If you're using in-ears, which increasingly on stage, you're seeing pretty much everybody, the old school guys like Joe Satriani for the longest time was not using in-ears, he's on ears. Steve Vai, he's on ears. So people that for a long time really depended on the sound of the guitar and the amp in the room, as part of their craft, which is a huge part of the craft, have now moved over to in-ears. So it means that you're in a different paradigm. And at the point that you're in a different paradigm, what you're hearing is a captured version of the guitar tones. So at that point, if you can get the amp to behave the same way, and mind you, a 112 load versus a 412 load will behave differently. So, but for the sake of conversation, a 112 load, one of the things I'm also going to experiment with, Celestion makes the Redback, and that is a 150 watt speaker. I'm going to experiment with putting those in one of those in the cabinet and see what a higher rated speaker does when you start to bring the amp up in volume versus a single Vintage 30 or a pair of Vintage 30s, and begin to experiment and seeing how the amp reacts. And we may actually end up finding that a slightly mismatched speaker load actually gets a better result out of the amplifier, even when you're using an IR of your favorite speaker in your favorite cabinet. So that is to say, there's a guitar player that's part of the conversation that I can't mention them by name, but they use a Badlander on stage with a drive pedal into the front end, and a 5-band EQ, and that's their on-stage sound. And that is, I think that's mic'd up. And then their front of house sound is a Mark Series amp. I'm not going to say any more than that. And it's not John Petrucci. So the front of house guy wants to have the Mark IV. The onstage player wants to have the Badlander. So you have, different needs. The front of house person, again, we were talking about, with the guitar and the EQ, painting in your lane. So if one amp behaves better front of house, let the front of house person who knows what they're doing, and it's their job to do that, kind of go, it's working better in the mix, and just go, I trust you. But when you're on stage and you want to have something, as long as those are parallel enough such that you know what you're playing, the way it responds on stage, and what's going to work front of house, they sound the same, right? It's imagine playing a Strat, but it's the sound of a Les Paul coming front of house. That's not necessarily going to give you that optimal, I'm playing this and I'm monitoring with this expectation. But front of house, you're like, oh, you're going to make different decisions. So they need to be somewhat cool. So Eric, that what you're hearing here, and again, the level is not I don't have it fixed yet. Even though it's kind of high gaining, getting the warmth of the cabinet. So when you go from the bottom of the neck to the top of the neck, things don't always get radically different, because a great cabinet will be consistent up and down the neck. So that is the oversized rectifier 412, also known as the rectifier standard, not traditional. Use the Boss Katana Go with Songster studio original tracks, nice synced per changes per song. That is, so you have delved beyond the Helix universe. So Katana stuff is just great. And, actually, Rhett Scholl, I haven't seen it yet, but he put out a video this week that I'm super excited to see, and he was talking about how incredibly impressed. Those are really incredible amplifiers, and they're tethered to the Waza Tube amp expander. And my dear friend, rest in peace, Jeff Slingluff, was involved in the development of that technology. He used to work with Line 6. He was involved in the development of the HD500, and he's a genius. He worked at DigiDesign, and he died of COVID, which is incredibly tragic, because he was the rock star at Boss. Bottoms up. I've kind of gone to using both speaker and direct, kind of the best of both worlds. It does alter what folks closest to the stage hear. So here's the thing: it's whatever works, right? Ultimately, we want it to feel great, we want it to sound great, and we want it to not be too much of a guessing game when it comes to any disparity of what's happening on the stage and disparity of what's happening front of house. That's a great question. So I am over at Sweetwater DPA. What DPA are you? I think it's the 4099. And being the stereo fanatic that I am, I have a pair of them. And the thing about these particular mics is they're incredibly transparent. Let me double check. DPA 4099. No, it's not. Which DPA are you? DPA. Sorry, guys. It's a great question. I want to be able to answer it. I'm 99% positive. Oh, my word. Oh. It's the DPA 4011C. It's a compact cardioid. They're $1,900 a pop. I'd forgotten they're a little expensive. First of all, by the way, to all the people that are watching, we're talking about all this stuff, and it's I can see when the number of people hanging out goes up and goes down. So first of all, if we haven't met, my name is Doug. Thanks for hanging out. If you got questions, I want to hear them. And if you're using reactive loads or IRs or whatever it is that you're doing, and or have comments or questions, drop them down below. Want to hear from you. But thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Okay. I've also gone straight 8. Simplifies things. Here we go. Albert, here we go. Come on. Yes, the different speakers will present a different load to the amp. Power section will react differently. 4 versus 8 versus 16. Speaker ohms will change the feel of the tones as well. So for those of us who didn't know, if you're using your Badlander and you go from the 100 watt to the 50 watt mode, you're actually dropping tubes and you're actually going from an 8 ohm load to a 4 ohm load, which means that if you've got an 8 ohm cabinet, you actually ideally want to move it from the 8 ohm jack over to the 4 ohm jack. So that's one of the other things that I learned this week. Holy cow. Good morning, Emmanuel. Great to see you. Welcome, 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 welcome. So Chris Alexander, I'm going to jump in. Let me just kind of get to the bottom here, and then I'm going to jump in with Chris's question. There we go. Zabados. So he, like you, is a Bay Area guy, and I guess he's kind of down in your neck of the woods. Wait a second. He does your live sound? What? Oh, that's awesome. He seems like an exceptionally nice guy. We've communicated this week via email. But do me a favor, when you next speak to him, tell him, if you dare, that we know each other. That's awesome. I stopped using a drive pedal in the front end. Instead, I've gone to just using an MXR comp instead. I love the amps drive without coloring it. Okay. I'm going to... Oh, Paul Trombetta. Hello, my friend. Great to see you. All right, let me make sure I've... Woot woot rock and roll day. Okay. And Sylvain, hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Philip, we all use headphones in the studio... took some experimenting with the guitar sound the way I wanted to. Mark V cab load. Thank you for, and it's honestly, it's a little unnerving, for all of us to step into something that we're not used to doing. Sean, good morning. Great to see you. How is the pink one? All right. Let me jump back up to, okay, hang on. Let me make sure I've got, okay, good. All right, we got there. So we were talking here. Okay, so we were talking about. I've also gone. Okay, so the thing is that the Celestian Redback. It's actually, Albert, you've got one of those. I'd love to know if you've had a chance to put that in one of your cabinets yet. But it's a 150 watt rated speaker. Amongst other things, although, we've been a little boogie here, there are other amps here other than boogie. So there is a Marshall Major that is so unfathomably loud, you can't imagine. It is a 200 watt amplifier. There's another amp here. It's Keith Richards' old high-powered twin. Those two amps, they're really, to kind of get them to the sweet spot, it's almost too loud to be in the room with, almost. But that's where that Celestian Redback, I'm really excited to get that in there. It has, as I recall, almost an identical curve to the classic Lead 80, and for all intensive purposes, the classic Lead 80 and the Black Shadow are essentially the same speaker frequency curve. They're essentially the same. I understand that there's very minute differences, but the great thing is that it's a very similarly voiced speaker, as I recall, to the classic Lead 80. I saw the kind of the frequency spectrum graph overlay, and I was like, okay, this is a winner here. I don't think it was overlaid next to the Vintage 30, but I will double check that to be factually correct. But the idea of being able to place that in an ISO box and then be able to experiment with using an IR, it's one of the ways you can not deafen yourself and you can get to that spot with tone, right? Because I'm pretty much decided, if I really want to get the amp to behave the way the amp's going to behave, when I'm using an IR or miking up the cabinet, or then shooting an IR of the way I mic up a cabinet that sounds like my my rig through my cabinet and then be able to use that as an IR and then put an active load with a speaker, then the frequency curve of that speaker, I think, is going to affect things. And obviously, we will also want to make sure that we match impedance. So with the Marshall stuff, it's ideally want to run it at 16 ohms. So I'm going to probably reach out to my friends at Celestia and say, hey, can you send some of these? I want to do some experiments, and I think it's going to be a big help to a lot of people. Okay. And so this is the other thing, is this is why the purist in me of like, well, do I want to use a drive pedal into the front of the Badlander? Then it's not the Badlander anymore. It's the Badlander with the drive pedal in the front end. However, because all these people are using a drive pedal in the front of the Badlander, I kind of, in the demo end of the world, need to know that. But it colors the way this thing is done. One of the videos that's on the back burner, but not forgotten, is a compressor video. And so the baby short version is that with a compressor, generally, you're looking for, and we've talked about this before, but for the sake of conversation, one of my favorite little sayings about this little gang is my job in the gear star is, and I mean it like, a sheriff star, not. The idea is to protect and serve your dollars such that you make the best possible investment. With a compressor, ideally you're looking for one that has a blend control, so you can blend in your direct signal and the compressed signal. Because that really gives you the ultimate flexibility if you want to really compress the signal, but blend in that heavily compressed signal. And it gives you more options there, as well as a tone control. Because the tone control allows you, because with a compressor what it does is if you look at kind of a waveform, the first thing you'll see is the treble. And so what a compressor will do is it will cut that peak of that treble transient, and so there will be less end. High end rather. So being able to blend in some high end back in there is really, really important. So that is Pickled. Switch to index finger. Non-side use of finger pad only. Thumb side use only. Non-pad. So you're talking this. So you're padding the first finger and siding the thumb. I pad the thumb and side the first finger. However, first of all, I've got one of my dear friends, his name's Bob, and he's about a foot taller than I am, and he's built differently than I am. And so what works for him doesn't necessarily work for me and vice versa. That's really interesting. So one of Chris's questions, and first of all, thank you for sharing that, because this is it gets to one of Chris's questions. And again, Paul, I hope I'm going to see you at Antlers, my friend. You also want to make the power section breathe, and those volumes with a live cab are deadly at my age. So, Albert, you and I aren't that different apart in terms of age. Different conversation for a different day. Tony, awesome. Thanks so much. I'm glad you're digging it. I love you dearly, my brother. So, yeah, the funny thing is that I'm teaching myself. I think one of the things about all of this, and as you're working with your technique, instead of running away from the things that you're not good at, running towards them, which has kind of been my mission for the past 3 months, and I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm making a lot of progress there. I'm like, you know what? Just because I don't like it doesn't mean it's not good for me. It's kind of like eating your vegetables when you're a kid. It's like, you know what? It's time for me to just grow up and get over myself. So it's kind of funny. Pick hold. Easy thumb side achieved by placing thumb pad on the pick and then allow the thumb to roll down till the pick is contacting the side of the thumb only. Right. So, I mean, it's kind of this whole, literally, like if you think about, and Albert, you asked a question about, hang on. I'm going to segue your judicious comment there about all of this, is that as you kind of, all right, hang on. Let's see if I can get that overlay for everybody else. That if you're on a mobile device, that of course is illegible. Easy thumb side. So easy thumb side achieved by placing the thumb pad on the pick, and then allow the thumb side, and then allow the thumb like that, and allow the thumb to roll down. I think you're meaning like that to roll down. Groovy. I love that. So I am a... Wait, no, wait, hold on. Easy thumb side achieved by allowing the thumb pad on the pick. Okay, got it. You're doing... Right, so you're doing this, and then you're rolling like that. Okay, cool. And are you using an open hand, or are you using a closed hand? Let's see, let me get in the sweet spot here. Okay. So you're... Now, I am this, and you're this. There we go. So it's going to... So you may end up... Or you're potentially back set. Oh, that's interesting. So Neil Sean is a back set picker, and I wonder if he's not doing that particular thing. And again, I'm like this. No, maybe more like that. Okay, I'm kind of curious. Unfortunately, you can't share a photo of that, but groovy. Yep, and the headphone thing. Okay, Jimmy, always a pleasure. Oh, awesome. I can't wait to hear it. The use of headphones requires wireless. Don't get me started. All right. Interesting. So, yes. All right. So, the pink one we got to work out tonight. Awesome. Congratulations. Motown. Nandini, hello. Great to see you. Hold on. Get over there. Hello. And Steve Greenleaf at the same time. And then Ada. Hello. First of all, I don't... Look at that photo. I don't recognize you yet, so hello and welcome. So, generally, the easiest, can't go wrong, best way is one of the multitude of reactive load boxes that are out on the market. The Waza Tube Amp Expander is great. The 2 Notes Torpedo or Captor X is really good. Sir makes a reactive load box that I haven't used, but it's supposed to be really, really, really good. There is the Iron Man, which I haven't used as well. In a perfect world, the best way, which is kind of what we're getting the heart and soul of, is if you can have an isolated cabinet that's in its own, a speaker that's in its own box, and or you can build, I've got upstairs, and it's going to be one of the things I'm going to be working into my flow here, is I have basically an alcove that used to be kind of a dressing area. And I boxed it in and put doors on it and ran cable through the ceiling, and it's wired waiting for me to drop some cabinets up there where you can create an area where you can kind of enclose that sound and have the amp, or in this case the cabinets, running at full volume, but you've created enough isolation there that you can't hear it there. You know, for those of us that have lived in apartments, you know, that's kind of an impossible feat to do. So in that case, having, you know, there are a number of companies that make them. Rivera makes one that's supposed to be really good. Randall makes one as well. The Mojotone one that I've got, I love. And, you know, so the ideal thing there is you're getting the amp and a speaker talking to each other. And then the Mojotone one, like some of the others, has a mic that you can place in there. The problem with doing the mic in the box is the box has a sound, and there is a boxiness to that. And so part of the way you can fix some of that is usually there's some sort of egg cratey, although it's not that same material, but it's shaped like that, absorption on the walls. You can potentially experiment with using different reflective surfaces. I'm going to go down the rabbit trail here, but it is important for this. And Shane, good morning, my dear friend. We're going to talk about pick angling and all of that in just a moment, because Chris had some great questions. But back in the day, I'm working on both a vocal album and an instrumental album, and that's why getting the sound in this room and just kind of going, hey, if it takes headphones, fine. I'm going to do whatever it takes, such that when I hand over my tracks to John Kuhneberg, he goes, I can work with this. And the last session that we did, I basically recorded all my tracks, went in and had Zorro the drummer and Angeline the bass player, and then Caleb the vocalist worked remotely. All my tracks were done with Cab Clone IR, and I came into the sessions and John pulled up the tracks and those sound great, but that was because all my tones were created just going into the box, which is a great way to work. Nothing wrong with that. However, if you've gotten hooked on the sound of your amp and your cabinet, then you kind of it's tone crack, and you're like, I want it to sound like that, and it's not like it doesn't sound great running direct, but there is something very unique about the actual way that the guitar and the amp and the cabinet work in the room. So if that is your jam, and you can't help yourself, then the cabinet, and then figuring out where either miking inside the cabinet or just using an IR. That way you've got the actual load on the amp, and there's some great IRs that are out there. Terry, great to see you. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Right, Dr. Nandini. Again, let's join us in celebrating Nandini's doctorship. All right, now Chris always has these great multitude of questions. I don't always get to them, but I may not hit all of them today, but I am going to talk about this whole pick slanting thing, because this is really, 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 really important. And I'm going to switch over to my alternate camera here. And so this whole pick slanting thing, and unfortunately I'm playing hang on a second. Oh, right. It's gonna be the black guitar, my black pickguard. My apologies. So the idea is as follows: is that if you think about the pick being parallel with the strings, like that, and or being at a 90-degree angle like that, or a 45-degree angle like that, and then in turn there's this little bit of an angle. Generally speaking, if you have, let's talk about this a little bit here first. So if I've got the pick, if you will, like as it relates to, regardless of where it's here or here, parallel with the string, or at a 90-degree angle or a 45-degree angle, I'm about there, and it allows me to have enough non-parallel, so I'm not getting kind of a tap, and most importantly, as I'm crossing the low E string. In fact, a really, really good test for you to do with your right hand, and this is actually something I have to credit Bernth, B-E-R-N-T-H. He is a YouTube sensation, and I actually have signed up for his Patreon, one of the few Patreons I support, because there were things I needed to fix on my right hand, and he was the guy that I was like, you know what, I'm going to check this out. But one of the things he really got me thinking about was how much pick noise I was actually getting on the low E string, and in turn how I could go about reducing that. So the idea is that pick angle is pretty consistent whether I'm on the low E string or the high string. There's a little bit of a natural arc of the arm that as you go like that, the angle will change, and generally I'm not adjusting that angle. So let's say I was at this angle here, I would kind of need to make some sort of adjustment. How do I say that? If I'm parallel, right, I would need to kind of do a little, I'm parallel here, I would need to do a little bit of a twist in my wrist there to be parallel there. So I'm not making some adjustment. It's generally about the same. And in turn, so that kind of, I would say, if that's 45 degrees, I'm at about somewhere between 14 and 17 degrees, give or take. And the idea, that your right hand is not making some sort of obscene amount of noise down here. And that took a lot of work. And one of the things that if you're having problems down on these bottom two strings, they've got more girth. The pick wants to get caught up. So a big part of that is the angle. If you think about the pick being parallel with the length of the string, that little bit of an angle, so it's not parallel with the length of the string, but like that. And that's different than the slant we're going to talk about in a moment. But the two work together. But the idea... But that little bit right there, in particular, coming back, and one of my favorite things to do is, like, if it's hard, then I just practice it, because I'm tired of running away from things that I can't do well, because it doesn't pay off in the long run. But the idea... Now, as we're talking about this pick slant bit of business, there are a couple of nuances around this, because... Paul Richard is not with us today, but he and I, in his private lesson last week, we went deeper on the pick slant, which is really, in addition to kind of the, again, if you think about the length of the string, parallel or having a little bit of an angle as you go like that, we're talking about the angle of the pick, if you will, around the circumference of the string. There we go. So we got the pick angle, if you will, as it relates to the length of the string, parallel or angled. And then you've got pick slant, if you will, around the circumference of the string. I think that covers it. Hey, Paul, there you go, my man. That was such a great job. It was actually really cute. Paul kind of apologized. I'm sorry, we're talking about, like, you have no idea. It was huge, and it's huge for so many people. So, Paul, I'm so grateful for that. And I, in turn, learned a lot about it. So there's a couple of things that are really important about this, is that there is a little bit of difference when you're playing pentatonic and three-note per string stuff. I find that when I'm using pentatonic, I can get away with a little tiny bit more pick slant than I can when I'm using the three-note per string modes. And that's simply because the splay and I purposely have a nothing tone. Like, there are some tones that are just so completely unuser-friendly that I say, as opposed to where it makes it easier to play versus because that's where the truth. So when I'm doing single pairs, I find that I can get a little bit more pick slant natural, and it works a little bit better. But when I start to do groups of threes, because I'm moving more between pairs of strings rather than on one string and then the other, I need to get a little bit less slant. And that actually makes a lot of sense. But as I've really been thinking about that, I was like, okay. Now, one of the other things last week we were talking about, and that's taking the first 6 notes of each mode at C, major, Dorian, Phrygian, sorry, how to play the 6-note Lydian, Mixolydian, minor, Locrian, and major. And the deal is the upward motion and the downward motion are a little tiny bit different. So I find that on the way, when I'm doing the downward motion, I've got a little less pick slant than when I'm going the upward motion. Uh-oh, I'm getting a text from Melissa Doppler. That's never good. Oh, okay. It's like, your mic's off. Like, no! It's not. But the idea is that I find such that I'm not... Because part of what you want to watch out for, and this is a very interesting thing, if you think about your alternate picking in groups of 3 notes, as we're going down, up, down, we finish with a downstroke. And if you think about inside picking, as in I'm on the inside of the second string and the first string going upstroke, downstroke on the second and first, versus outside picking being on the outside of the second string and the outside of the first. As we're going on the high E string, down, up, down. I'm in the outside of the first string, and I need to get over to the inside of the second string. So it's a very interesting thing because you're down, up, down. We're literally below, if you will, the first string, and we literally kind of get below the second string. You're like, you kind of think about it, it's like, oh, that's kind of weird. So what I really kind of realized is there is a little bit of down, up, down, and somehow there's this little bit of movement where the right hand, to actually play that up note, is moving for that upstroke on the second string. And so somehow it's already in the down position after a downstroke. It traverses and does a little bit of a London Bridge jumping over, and then trying to make it so my pick is lined up with, there we go, with the pick up there. So it kind of, we finish with a downstroke below, and then we got the next thing is an upstroke below as well. That is, I finished with I went down, up, down. I'm on the far side of the high E string below that string because I just kind of went through with a downstroke. Now I got to be on the inside of the second string with an upstroke. So that is to say that pick angle and that little jump there, I find that on my way up, I can have a slightly more parallel pick angle on the way. On the way up, yeah, and on the way down, I find that I have a tendency to increase my pick slant there, and so there's all sorts of nuance to this. So first of all, Shredward, what's going on, my man? Hey, always a pleasure. Eric, hello. Please share pickless hybrid technique you've learned to see with the cool camera angle with the wrist. Well, sure. And my buddy Albert asked about this last week. So if you don't mind, I'm going to incorporate a little bit of pick. So if you want to start off... a great place to start is with the A minor pentatonic. That is, you are at the 5th fret, and you're playing 1 4 1 3 1 3 1 3 1 4 1 4, and we're on the 4th and 3rd strings at the 5th and 7th fret, and basically. And I like doing a little hammer on from that G to that A. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a... Sorry, I'm 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a... It's a great way to start. So what I'm doing is I'm just walking that up. You can also walk up. That's just doing that same hammer on. And you're just going. So I'm not doubling the top note. That's over on the top 2 strings. That's 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. So that's basically, and that's an E, G, A, E. And that's pick, hammer, pluck. So on the high E string. You know what? Dumb it down a little bit. so what I'm going to do, sorry. Let's start off with this little guy. Eighth note triplets. 16th notes. And that's just taking the G and the A on the 4th string and the C and the D on the 3rd string. That's GAC. This is GACD. And then let me not go there yet. And that's 8th note triplets. Not well played. And that's just, but instead of going, sorry, let me, I'm not doing a great job of explaining this. So there I'm just 4 up and 4 down. And there I am repeating the top note. You could go, but we're, and that's basically that same idea I did with the pick, which I didn't explain before, but I am going to do it now. So that's basically G, A, C, A. And then we add, that's just DC over there on the 3rd string. And then at the end, we don't add that last one there. We're basically going 1E and a 2E, and a 3E and a 4E, and oh, sorry, 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a, sorry, there you go. So that'll say this is going to be 6 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're going to double that. And we just go, that's the first little bit of that, and we leave out the, because that's going to give us 6, plus another 6, and a 4, which gives us 16. Not perfect there. So when I switch away from using the pick, the reason I would stay with the pick, keeping the pick there. It allows me to kind of keep that pick there so for the things that I need. But however, getting back to Zach's excellent comment, thumb, dropping the pick literally, the pick is actually dropping. I'm letting go of it with my first finger, and it's falling into between my thumb and my second finger. And my first finger comes around, and now, and then I just kind of go from there. Thumb comes around and grabs the edge of that. So I've got it like this. Thumb comes around, grabs the edge of the pick. First finger moves out of the way. And then that's funny. That's exactly what Zach was talking about, where the thumb is sliding along the edge of the pick. So the pick is like this. I bring the thumb in. I bring the first finger out. And then I use a combination of, I use the combination of the, no, I was over here. Use the combination of the first finger and the thumb to walk up, get the pick like that. Now, the thing about using the fingers, you might, now what you got to watch out for is that when you, as you're going, I'm hitting the A there at the 7th fret on the D string. And I'm basically going with on the 3rd string, those 2 notes with the first finger on the right hand, and then those 2 notes there, and that 3rd note coming back down without repeating the top note. That's the 2nd finger on the right hand. You can also do it with the first finger. However, to get the double stop, so that little kind of bit of kind of chicken squawk, I would suggest taking that A and that C there. And you're kind of moving the thumb and the first finger around, almost in the same way that if you took pairs of strings. And I have a tendency, much of the time, much of what I'm doing is the thumb and the first finger kind of moving from, and there, I will kind of, in the open position, that open A there, that octave, as I kind of move down to that bit, I will kind of have the the thumb will be kind of moving back and forth between the 5th and the 4th. All right, I digress, but hang on a second here. There we go. So I hope that was a help, Eric. Oh, wait, hold on. There we go. Yeah. All right, there we go. Braden, awesome. I tucked the pick in the curl of the index finger. That's another place. There we go. So, it's an interesting... Awesome. Oh, dude, with pleasure. No, this is why we do this. We love this together. Seriously, we could be fans of hot dog contests. People love that, right? But we get to be fans of this, right? So we get to come together and commiserate on techniques and this stuff. And the thing about this, I'm going to jump back in. And Albert, you kind of awesome, good. Now, and that's the thing. It's just it's a vibe. The thing that I want to get across here, and I'm going to kind of jump back in just a second. Keep an eye on the chat. The most important thing is I'm going to pull up a little bit of reverb here because I'm going to give myself just a little bit of ambience. There we go. So one of the most important things that I can easily miss, and I don't want to, is the sound of there's this, and there's, and that is the equivalent of that is how much finger I give it. Now you'll see a bunch of the finger pluckers. Sometimes they'll give a lot of finger in there. That is a slightly different thing where we're looking for velocity. Conversely. But the velocity, and so now I'm giving, hold on. I'm giving it, come on, there we go, a lot of finger. President. And what it makes for, it's almost as if you're using it like a bow. For instance, and so that opposing digit thing. And kind of picking pairs. Okay, so let's say now we're going to go up. We're going to basically take the minor pentatonic. Sorry. Yeah, I'm going to have you go up, down, and up. Groups of 4 notes. That's going to be 12, right? not brilliantly executed, but I'll practice that. Oh, sorry. I would also suggest doing that in foursies. Then twos. Then ones. And watch out for that. Not well played. That's right. And on the way down, we the last two pairs of strings. And by the way, what I did is I brought this part of my thumb down on the string so to mute them. That's on the way up, and then we flip it around. And I didn't do it as I descended the last time, not what I just played, but before. But ideally, you're going to take this little group of 12 notes and treat it as a pair of strings. The other thing is, dyads. Not necessarily like double stop, right? Didn't quite outline them the way I wanted to. The other thing about this playing is it lends itself to chromatic. Most comfortable place for most people to start with the chromatics. Well, obviously not me. There's the 1 flat 3 4. That's a flat 5 and the 5. And I'm kind of using kind of an old school, kind of a pentatonic hammer on from nowhere. Almost like I would just use the pick. All right. And so the great thing is that, yeah, the sound of the fingers is just like, holy cow. The other thing is, wait for it, you play different stuff. Love that. It's like, holy cow. And it's just so organic, and I love that. Yes, the texture is a difference versus the pick is huge. Have I ever tried DPA mics on a Theo cabinet? Yes. And you would probably be very happy. So I'm 99.9% positive that that leaves a little bit of room for margin. I did a series did some content for Celestion, and one of the things that I did was on their full range live response speakers. That was the series. And I'm pretty sure that one of the things that I did was I put their full range live response speakers into a pair of Theo cabinets. And I think one of them still got it in there. And the great thing about these mics is they just sound like whatever's coming out of the cabinet. And that is a very rare quality. And that's why it's a $2,000 mic. And I, being a stereo nut, like, well, I can't just have one. I've got to have two of them. But they are just fantastic mics. Excuse me. Tom Atkins. Hello, my friend. How you doing? Hold on a second. Aha! Hello, Braxel. Great to see you, my friend. Hold on. Hi. 99.9. I am talking about the DPA 4011C, my friend. What are these mics of which you speak? Hello, producer, bass player, and occasional engineer and educator extraordinaire. So the 4011C, unlike any mic I've ever used, and I will say any mic that I've ever used, it's not a cheap microphone, but it just sounds like whatever, you're kind of, whatever's in front of it, as long as you kind of get the proximity and the relationship to the dust cap in the right place. But I will give you my favorite bass cabinet miking technique. Not that you don't have one that's better, Brent, but the thing is as follows. Years ago, I kind of did... Should. I've never seen a Sustainiac in a telly. Braxel, you're very kind. Thank you so much. It's kind of like, a grown-up kid. I just go down into the playroom, right? So the bass cabinet miking. So years ago, I kind of was in charge of doing the video content for Orange, and one of the things that I kind of was faced with was like, how do we actually make bass amps sound good over the internet? Because that's kind of like, all right, I can figure it out. And finally, I realized I know what the trick is. It's as long as it's got a port, you put and it's kind of what you would do for a heavy metal cabinet. You find the edge of the dust cap, you put the 57 there, give or take a half an inch to an inch away, right? To get the transient attack and all of that stuff. 421 on the port to capture all the stuff and all that goodness that's coming out of it that's filling the room. And together, I was just like, gosh darn it, it sounded just like it. It was, and I'm sure you've kind of done similar things. Chances are, in addition to a 421, a kick drum mic, like what is the Shure Beta 52, might be another way to go, because the 52's got to capture the attack of the beater and also the body, right, of what's coming out of the kick drum. So, all right. Gosh darn it. First of all, I can see the numbers have popped up a little bit, and If we haven't met, my name's Doug. Welcome aboard. If you've got any questions about anything gear, recording, microphones, getting better, not stagnating, drop it in the chat. You are invited and welcome. I like a 420, wanted a bass amp, also a RE20 and a FET 47. There you go. RE20 is also another great way to go. A big mic. That guy's got a big mic. Holy cow. Did I say that? All right. Chris had another question. Oh, wait. Hold on. Reverb, be quiet. So Chris always has a multitude of great questions. So he asked a couple of things about packing stuff up. Let me get here, and let me see if I can do this easily. And so let me get here. No, let me get there. Let me get... What I'm doing is showing you my approach for selling pedals. And let me get... Okay, you're offline. Give me a moment. All right, so I was not using this Earthquaker Devices pedal, so this is kind of one of the things I'm going to do. Let me share this guy. That's not what I want to share, but we'll get there. Finder, which finder are we going for? There we go. All right, that is going to get us there, and in theory, I'm going to move me over. Come on, get out of the way there. And in theory, when I do this, you're going to see a photo. No, you're not. All right. So, sorry, give me a moment. I can figure this out. So why am I not saying? I guess I need to be showing. All right, hold on. Give me a moment. I have a better way to do this. Hold on. I can do this, and I can do that, and I can launch those. Come on. Don't be like that. There we go. Launch as a group. There we go. All right, you have a second. I'll be with you. I've got this figured out. Finder. I'm almost there. Really, I can figure this out. Really annoying, by the way. Oh, sorry, it opened a preview. That's what I did. My bad. All right, there we go. That's what we're looking for. Thank you. Sorry about that. So basically what I do is my number one shot is always the box, any case candy, and the pedal. So immediately you know, hey, it's got the box. Then I've actually, as of late, have switched the order of my first shot. My first shot is angled this way, straight on, then angled this way, then kind of flip it around 180 degrees, and then the bottom of the pedal. That will tell anybody who's looking at that stuff, hang on a second here. Hang on a second here. All right, let me get back to the previous. Guy Wozniak, what's going on, my friend? How you doing? Great to see you. You know, there was a question that I had with a mutual friend of ours, a buddy named Trent, if there was any relationship, because it is not a super common name. In any case, Guy, Boogie Brethren, welcome aboard. Hello, hello, hello. So I think I may have a sandwich for lunch. All right, there we go. Oh, here we go. Come on, getting down to the geeky stuff. All right. So for those of you that are on a mobile device, and that's about this big. Hey, Doug, first of all, Guy, great to see you. Welcome. I think this is your first time coming and visiting, so welcome aboard. Great to see you. What audio interface do I use and prefer? I'm considering the UA Apollo X6 or X8. The first gen models are on clearance, but I'm worried will UA support a discontinued model for years to come? All right. Lots to unpack. I'm a UA endorser, so let me do all the politically correct dancing around that, but also kind of one of my mottos that I, around the gear sheriff, which is to protect and to serve people's wise investments, and that any advice that I give serves you really well for years and decades to come. So first of all, I am an Apollo 8 and not an X8. So for those of you who don't speak Universal Audio, I am a Universal Audio fanboy. I've got 3 of these, one of which, as stupid as it sounds, is relegated literally for just turning the volume up and down in the control room here. My main audio interface is an Apollo 8. One of the great things about Universal Audio, in my opinion, that I've discovered to date, is that they don't abandon legacy hardware. And there are so many people out there that are using the Apollo 8 that they would piss an awful lot of people off. So historically speaking, I have found that they've been really, really, really good. Unlike some of the companies that are in the space that are not great about this, about supporting the legacy hardware, because they understand the customer loyalty is a really good thing. And if you really piss off a customer at the acquisition point of their life cycle, they're going to go buy something else because there are lots of other great audio interfaces out there. So I have an RME UFX3 and an RME M1620 per 0 issues and love them. So this is my point. So there are lots of great manufacturers that have people who absolutely love what they do. So for anybody who is kind of going, you guys are speaking Greek to me, I'm going to see if I can clarify this, because there are some Focusrite audio interfaces that are going to be part of a video on Focusrite interfaces. There are some UA interfaces that are going to be part of a UA interfaces thing. And one of the things, once I kind of get a little bit further along in the recording process of my vocal album, my instrumental album, that I'm going to really zero in on is better serving the guitar community when it comes to using a DAW and using an audio interface. Because I got to tell you, if I didn't know what I know about this stuff, and I were to start now, I would be really confused. With sample rate, buffer size, like all this stuff that until you actually know what it does and how much it can screw you up if you get it wrong, it's infuriating. And then there's getting permissions for Waves plugins. Don't get me started. Universal Audio, the real value proposition is the hardware's great, but what you get, although you can get it elsewhere now, is you get their plugins, which are, in my opinion, as good or the best in the industry. And they have emulations of all this great Neve gear. My go-to jam, for the most part, is actually these days, because I try and get an unadulterated sound captured going into the DAW. So I try not to use any plugins, but as I'm bouncing stuff down, I use an SSL G-Series 4000 console stereo bus compressor, and then I run that into the Sonics limiter. And I do a little bit of just stereo busing to make everything get a little bit of glue. And then for outputting stuff into, especially for video, I get stuff since it's -5 dB. And that's where the Sonics becomes really, really valuable, just kind of squeezing it and just getting it so that it doesn't get any louder without really changing what happens with the SSL is you are creating some glue, so things kind of squish together, where with a really good limiter, it just kind of makes things louder, quieter, without kind of changing the harmonic and the percentage balance between the individual instruments. And I use those together. So the deal is, the Universal Audio stuff is great. I think getting a great deal on something that's being closed out is great. Your biggest challenge is as follows. These interfaces, when I travel, I always have to remember to bring, is it in this travel bag? No, that's my studio USB bag. There is a travel bag that is not right here, but basically you have to, I'm going to forget the name of the old connector that those run on. But you have to have your adapter and your cable, and it's a little bit of a drama. So sooner or later, USB-C, hence the X, is going to be the new standard for everything. And so you're going to end up needing a cable that's basically your USB because I'm tethered with headphones, give me just a moment. Let me just take a look at one thing over on Sweetwater. Apollo 8. Let me just make sure I'm not speaking out of my posterior. Apollo 8. Not the X8, but just the regular Apollo 8. There we go. I want to look at the back side of this puppy, and what I'm looking for is the connectors, which, there we go. Come on, backside. Seriously? Sweetwater. They don't actually have the backside of the interface of that particular one. That's really strange. Come on. There we go. Okay. So the got it. That's right. It was the non. Right. The non big boy one. So the Apollo 8 still runs on USB-C connectors, and so the X features as I wait. No. I'm looking at an X. Hold on. All right, hang on a second. You know what? I said I wasn't going to do that today, but I'm doing it. Give me just a moment. I'll be back in a sec. Let me just... That was the microphone and the headstock. I'll be back in a sec. Look in the back of my audio interface so I can tell you definitively what type of USB connection it's got. Let's take a look here. Because being accurate is the deal. Okay. Yep. Being 100% positive. Okay. Yes. Okay. Got it. Thunderbolt 800. That's what I thought. Okay. Somebody already knew that answer. Probably already put it down in the chat. Sorry. But this is important. And this gets back to the comment I had before. So my Apollo interface, putting on my favorite headphones because I'm learning to love them. So my Apollo interface is a Thunderbolt 800, I think is the name of that connection. That is so I have to use an adapter to get into my iMac Pro. So it's not a big deal, but it's a generation back, and you're going to have to use that to get from your Thunderbolt 800 or Fireway 800 or Thunderbolt. Pardon my agedness, it's one of those two connections, but the point being is that you have to use an adapter, just like you have to use with these guys, to get into your USB-C. Generally speaking, historically, as long as you've got the right adapter, these things work pretty well. However, if I were to go out today and buy one, and I'm searching Apollo 8, and I'm looking at seeing if I can see the discount that's on these guys. So I'm seeing all the X's, and I'm not seeing any of the older ones that are out there. That's a really good question. I might be inclined to, knowing that my Apollo 8 is running off of, I think it's the Firewire 800, it's Thunderbolt. And again, my apologies for confusing those two connections, because I have to use an adapter. I don't take this rig anywhere, but when I take these rigs with me, if I forget my adapter, I'm screwed. And because it's a generation of technology that's back, you're not going to find it at most Guitar Centers, or back in the day when there was a Radio Shack, you wouldn't find it there. You're not going to find it at the Apple Store some of the time. Sometimes you will. So the point being is you're leaving yourself up to a liability that if you go with something that is going to be USB-C based, you're probably going to be there. There we go. Sonia, hello. So another RME user. Thank you for that. And hi. Nick, currently using the Audient product, no issues, great results. Do want to upgrade to UA, but a lot of used units don't transfer the firmware. So there we go. GC has a Gen 1 X8. Okay, X8 for $1899. Gen 2 is $2,800 is my conundrum. Okay, hold on. So let me just get over to GC here. Guitar Center. All right, so they're both X8. So in my understanding of speaking UA gear, X8, come on. There we go. Hold on. UA X8. Let's see if that's going to get us there. There we go. All right. Oh, okay. So here's the deal. So let me share this screen here. So this is going to be my favorite mission, protect and serve. This is something that I want to point out to anybody that's watching this. This is what this means to me when I get to the right screen. Google Chrome. Not Chris Buck, not today. By the way, his band's coming to America. You've got to go see him because they are fantabulous. There it is. That's what we're looking for right there. Okay, here we go. All right, so the deal is when you see something like, and I don't know if you're picking up my mouse movement. You're not. Okay. But when you see like $29.99 crossed out for, $29.99 crossed out to $21.99, generally what that means is really, really good news for a consumer. What that means is they've got inventory. They're like, we just want to get rid of this inventory. It's taking up space in our warehouse. We're paying money on it to the manufacturer. We want it gone. So the fact that it is X8, and let me just double check that that is in fact going to be running on USB-C. My bad, I may have misread your question. So let me look at the back of this guy and make sure that in fact it is Guitar Center. You know, I'm going to leave that up to you to research whether that's whether there's. I think X indicates that it is running on USB-C compliant connectors. Hold on, let me just take a look here real quick. Does it say it here? You know what? I'm actually not going to go all the way down the rabbit trail. I'm going to leave it up to you to find that. Hold on. Thunderbolt 3. No, okay. Hold on. Thunderbolt 3. So what I'm checking is the connector on Thunderbolt 3 here. All right. So is that there you go. So Thunderbolt 3 is a USB-C connection. Okay. So the deal is that is a protocol that's not going to go away. So unlike the old Thunderbolt 2, which is an old protocol, you then have to start using an adapter. It's a pain in the butt. And it may be Thunderbolt 1, but I'm pretty sure it's a Thunderbolt 2 to USB-C adapter. And if you forget your adapter, you're a host. But generally speaking, I think that would be a great deal, well saving the money. So for those of you, and I'm sorry that took a little bit of a circuitous route there, and in 8 minutes I have to teach a lesson, or I get to teach a lesson, so we're going to have to break this off. But here's the thing. First of all, thanks for watching. I hope this is serving you. The whole thing about UA is you get these great plugins. The other thing is with UA, and this is the most important thing, you get what's called console. Let me get over to the right application. And Universal Audio Mixer Engine. So can you call that console? There we go. So that, as you can see, my microphone is on there kind of as I talk. It peaks up there. And on the right-hand side, you're going to see aux 1 and aux 2. And that's where, although they're not all quote-unquote on, I've instantiated a couple of different instances of my favorite Cooper Time Cube and Lexicon 221 plugins. Their plugins are amazing. Braxel with great pleasure. So the deal is, their plugins, this console platform, basically the biggest drama of working with a DAW is you've got your audio that's on the hard drive and you've got your audio that's coming in. And the listening point is where latency is created, because you're getting this audio to play off the hard drive, you're getting the audio to play into the computer, and depending on what's going on, you potentially need the audio to go into the computer, and if you're using an amp sim plugin, to then do that processing and come back. So that's one of the disadvantages of using an amp sim as an actual plugin as opposed to using some sort of, well, in this particular instance, I could use an amp sim. Ironically, I don't know why it's over here, but hang on, let me get over here. I don't quite know why it ended up over here, but this right here, I can already tell that's probably not visible in eCam. There we go. So that's actually an amp sim there. So I could actually use that on my way into the DAW and actually not, quote unquote, print that to tape. That is to say, I have the option of just monitoring on the console with that or actually recording into Pro Tools with that. And in turn, any of the sounds that I like, if I happen to pull up, so noting that you could see this is one of my favorite things, is I get to a setting on my, hold on, let me go to the one that's actually on here. So if I'm recording and I kind of like, I don't want to print with this reverb, but I love the way this reverb sounds, and I learned this from Larry Mitchell. Right down here, you've got your copy settings. So although you recorded without the reverb actually printing to your Pro Tools track, you can then copy those settings, instantiate that UA plugin inside your DAW, and get those exact same sounds, and then adjust them to taste after the fact. That workflow, that round-trip workflow, is a big deal, because that console is acting like a regular mixing console, and that's where the sound coming from your hard drive meets the sound going into your computer. And so that's one of the ways that you can keep the latency to a relative minimum, in combination with whatever your DAW you're using and how many tracks you've got and how many plugins you've got and how your DAW is set. However, Chris Lewis, I love you dearly, my dear friend. Awesome guy with great pleasure. Bat channel, same bat time. Thank you, gentlemen. Zach, 10 minutes. There we go. So, Guy, hope that answers the question. For those of you, so somebody else, who was it said about upgrading to the UA? It was Nick, right? So the whole thing is that with UA, you get these great plugins. And in my opinion, Waves has great plugins. The authentication process is lame. And Waves, I'm just going to say it, Waves screwed me. They used to have a permanent license, and then one year they decided we're going to switch it to an annual license. And I bought a lifetime license, and they just screwed me. Not only that, with Waves, they've got this really, pardon the expression, ghetto authorization process that at 12:01. On whatever day it is that authorization comes around, every so often, the authorization doesn't work properly. You're in the middle of a session, it's 12 midnight, and you're trying to get in touch with tech support, which was in India. I wanted to murder people. I've never had a company leave me so frustrated in the middle of a creative moment, and I was dependent on whatever plugin I was using. I'm just like, I'll never trust this company again. They really pissed me off. So that is to say, Waves is kind of in the poop house. Universal Audio really cares about a great customer experience, and now you can use their plugins as a standalone native plugin inside your favorite DAW. So Nick, to answer your question, now you can use their plugins. You don't get console and you don't get their interfaces, but you can use their plugins in any DAW. And so they kind of they realize that they want to take over the world, and they're doing a great job. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate your hanging out, and I hope this has been helpful. I have never played to a 50 caliber yet, but I have heard of it. Nick, with great pleasure, and thank you so much. And like I said, that one of the things that's on the list of a couple of things, the compressors, yes. Audio interfaces, both a roundup of the UA stuff and a roundup of this. And so, by the way, the little 6-input UA guy or the 4-input are both really, really cool, including the lesser expensive ones. If you're not needing something crazy, but you just want to get inside the UA world, it's an easy on-ramp. All right, so much love to you guys. Mike Rand, you have a great weekend at all. I had the same plan with Waves. I was so pissed. Calm. All right, Sonia, what a pleasure. And you and I are going to connect sooner than later. I don't keep mouthing it. I mean it. Much love, everybody. Have a great one, and I look forward to seeing you next Saturday. Thanks so much for sharing your Saturday with me, and I'll see you the next time. Until then, You take care. And Albert, thank you so much, and I'll see you Saturday night, too. Cheers, everybody. And I'll be playing live at Antlers here in the Bay Area in Banol Saturday night. Can't